Hi, I'm Carolyn Logue, and I'm here for the Puyallup Sumner Chamber of Commerce. Sitting with me today is John Frostad. He's a candidate for state representative in the 31st District, position 1. Thank you for coming today, John.
Thank you.
I have a few questions for you.
Sure.
I think the first one, and probably what everyone's wondering, is what do you think is the most important issue in your race?
Well, obviously the pressing issue right now for the 27 legislature is really education spending. So we have till 2018 to satisfy the McCleary decision. So obviously that's going to be the big battle. It's going to be the all-encompassing thing that we're going to see in the 2017 legislature. So obviously that's a big priority for us to all weigh in on. I think one of the things that we need to focus on really is that having accountability for that increased spending, meaning simply spending more money isn't necessarily going to achieve different results from our education system. So one of the things I would really like to see is us actually kind of liberalize the state requirements on schools and actually look to actually empowering school boards to actually make a little bit more local decision making in conjunction with parents and teachers, to really look to try to innovate and reform and make that money work for us a little bit better. Each school district has its own demographics that it has to deal with, and so should be able to create a little bit more diversity and solutions for them. But one of the things I really think we need to focus on in education as well is really focusing on graduation rates. I think we really need to focus on life skills, which is something that's very lacking in schools these days. And I think the other thing we really need to focus on is actually creating some divergent pathways to employment for young people, meaning college preparedness isn't going to be a universal solution for employment.
And how specifically do you think you would like to support the business community in the legislature?
So I'm a big proponent of free market enterprise. I think one of the things the government shouldn't necessarily do is pick winners and losers when it comes to the economy. So artificially propping up failing and stagnant industries is not necessarily in our interest. I think we have a really highly regulated environment to do business in, and I think in a lot of ways it's a nuisance to billion-dollar industries, but it's actually kind of a death by 1,000 cuts really to a lot of small businesses. So I think we really need to try to restrain our regulations on the economy really to health and safety issues, and really not create ever more regulation, which is difficult to navigate. So really I would advocate for a really much more open and fair play field for all businesses to really so we have foster a lot more competitiveness and a lot more innovation.
Okay. There is an initiative, Initiative 1433, that raises our state's minimum wage and implements paid sick leave, mandated paid sick leave. What is your position on that initiative or legislative alternatives?
I believe employment really is a contract between an employer and employee. And I think that really both sides should have all the negotiating power that they need to actually fulfill that contract. I think there's a lot of focus on the benefits to low wage workers in instituting such things, but in a lot of ways we don't really focus much on the detriments there really are to the unemployed worker, meaning that we have a lot of low skill and inexperienced workers out there that really need to achieve employment. And actually increasing the cost of labor is going to make employers a lot more selective as to who they hire, which means the chronically employed probably will find it even harder to be employed in an environment where we increase labor costs with minimum wage and also with mandatory paid leave.
Okay. What tax increase would you support, if any?
So I really can't at all support a state income tax or a capital gains tax. I think our legislators really, one of their paramount duties is really to account for every dollar of taxes that we contribute to the system, make sure that they're all accountable and efficient, meaning I think our legislators really should look for reductions in spending and a lot more efficiencies in spending long before we consider alternate forms of taxation. So if it does come to the point where we do need to raise some more revenue beyond what we currently have in the budget, I would support using our current mechanisms of taxation to achieve that.
Okay. And as a legislator, are there any specific jobs you would look to bring to our community?
Well, I think it's really not necessarily the best strategy to rely entirely on attracting billion-dollar industries to Washington as a way to actually achieve employment. I think really the backbone of the economy really is small businesses, and I think the more effort we put into creating an environment that's healthy for the entrepreneurs and startups to do well in Washington, the better. And so much as if we have a lot more diversity in the types of employment, we have a lot more opportunities for stabilizing employment in Washington state. So I think when we're looking for jobs, we really need to look to the small business sector to provide most of those. And I think we really need to diversify the number of industries in Washington and look to the health of the industries across the board as the way to achieve more employment.
Thank you.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate your time today.
Thanks.
Thanks.